Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Hollow and it's time to consider the classes and the comparative power in Season 4. Since we are now nicely into the true endgame, the pushers are trying to achieve the highest results possible. What's going to be the best way to judge that? I found that the gauntlet is shockingly unpopular this season, certainly compared to the pits, and then say the new Torment bosses, they're just being crushed to the point where, we're bursting them down instantly. So I think the best way to look at performance is to look at pits, which has been pretty surprising. We went in thinking Necromancer's output would maybe outshine the rest, even if its survivability isn't as good as others. And while Necromancer certainly is a top performer in the end, it's pretty close, even with the Holy Bolts bug. Without it, that's a very different story. So that brings us to the whole real top clears versus the very interesting Maxroll clears. If you didn't know, Maxroll has created a fun event that began on the 21st of May and ends on the 3rd of June. In short, you need to provide video proof of your best clear using their rule set. The main rule here is that the Elixir of Holy Bolts is banned because it's busted. This list is absolutely worth looking at. You'll get a good representation of what's really going on, but it is not a perfect representation. It's a community run event. Rather than taking from the clears of every pit that's happening ever from everyone, it's whoever submits and is even aware of this competition. So there's significantly less data to pull from, but it is still worth looking at. Personally, I've been scrolling through the internet to find the best runs with proof, and yeah, a lot of Maxroll's current listings do line up for obvious reasons. The main difference though is Necromancer, since it's basically with or without Holy Bolts, and the difference is big. Just remember though that I'm making this video right now, but when it's uploaded is sometime after. So the rankings may and probably will have changed slightly in real time after I've released this. Now the bottom two stay the same no matter where you would look, it would seem. At the bottom right now is Sorcerer, with a pit clear of tier 112 by Roxy. Roxy was the same Sorcerer that had an impressive tier 100 clear before anyone else, at least for Sorcerers, and now they've managed to push it 12 whole tiers above that, using the same principle. It's the immortal Sorcerer that focuses on reducing damage to such a degree that it becomes immortal. That's the basis of pushing pits and say the original abattoir. You need to become damage immune at a certain point because you simply won't survive without it. However, Sorcerer with this build faces a massive issue with its output, and there's a lot of discussion as to why their output's so much lower, suggestions that their damage numbers aren't scaling properly, maybe unintentional results by the devs, maybe we'll see some number tweaks eventually, but it's obviously not simple to do. In any case, the best clear right now is this one, a 112, using the Flame Weaver unique gloves as a core concept. You send out firebolts through a firewall, which will split them into multiple bolts, dealing more damage. Meanwhile, the immunity comes from the classic Flame Shield, which is maintained the entire run. As you can see, the health is not moving. The setup requires really high cooldown reduction and then Flame Shield duration, so you always have it. The issue is it's very low DPS compared to other builds. This clear came down to the wire, with about 5 seconds left when the boss died. There is a lot of efforts right now to bring Frozen Orb builds into the mix, which has way better DPS, but way more issues with survivability. Josh thinks we could see a sudden shift when players refine these builds and maybe achieve something with it. By the way, small addition here, while I was making this video, Rox had the top clear, then Makuna and Lemon actually did slightly higher clears at tier 113 and tier 115, using very similar concepts or even the same build. Above Sorcerer though, we have Druid with a tier 115 clear by Ace of Spades shots, using a Windshield build, which comes as a surprise because the Druid community was mostly working on the basis of Werewolf Tornado and Hurricane as a mix with relatively good results. Ace dropped with this new build concept though has proven better in the pits. What was the main issue with Tornado? Well, it's got way better output, but much bigger issues with survivability. It doesn't matter how good your output is if you're dead. So this Windshield build aims to be more survivable with, better DR, but also just being further from the targets. This clear was a success with 30 seconds remaining on the clock, so it's pretty tight like the situation with Sorcerers. The way it's played is interesting though. He stands back and throws these wind blasts from medium range to avoid all the incoming damage where possible. They're fired off so quick, it's like a constant stream, bombarding targets. It can also tank hits a little bit longer where Tornado just can't, and that's a major issue for Tornado. When you get to the boss, you're not able to stand there and slap it to deal the damage. You got to run around and avoid the mechanics a lot, which means you've basically got no DPS. With this setup though, you're playing safely from far away at range, moving around the boss to avoid mechanics no problem, and it's also easier to do that when you're further away. And because you can attack from range, damage, you're always able to attack. Since the timer was pretty close here though, I do think the build is reaching its maximum ability pretty soon, so this very well could be near the top of the hill for druids. We're gonna have to see. At third though, this is where things really diverge. If you aren't allowing holy bolts, we have a Necromancer with a tier 121 clear, using yet a classic golem build. This was achieved by Troll2625. The clear is reliable with things like Blood Mist for avoiding the worst of incoming damage, and lots of bursts through Army of the Dead and new golem spam. Compared to the two we just looked at, this player had over 3.5 minutes left on the timer when killing the boss, so that's a pretty big gap. It's also 6 tiers higher and he got more time left over, so I think it's fair to say that we'll see at least a 1-2-2 or 1-2-3, or maybe even higher with some time. But if you do allow holy bolts, Necromancer shoots way up on the board, so who is really third right now? It's Rogue, with a very impressive tier 125 clear by Mippy. It's the same Heartseeker concept we looked at before with Mippy, simply now min-max to reach higher potential. Heartseeker Rogue is all about the basic attack Heartseeker, which gains massive attack speed while in use, spreading its damage around targets. There's many ways for the Rogue to increase the attacks per second, from Moonrise aspect to tempered affixes and otherwise. Mippy's trying to reach the minimum frames per attack to allow for this ridiculous stream of blows. Defensively, you've got things like Shakos for the 20%, Undying aspect for all the healing as many Heartseekers hit targets, alongside the intense CC provided through smoke grenades, caltrops, and the mobility that Rogue usually runs. You got a lot there. CC, DPS, mobility, healing. So I'm very happy to see rogues do so well. Just because they have to generally try a lot harder, they have much higher APM to play. I want them to be rewarded for the effort they put in. With this setup though, they're able to face tank packs of enemies pretty well with all the CC and healing, which does allow them to focus more on output. At the end though, this was still a clear with over 3 minutes and 30 seconds left when the boss died. So I think this can go a little higher than the current placement we see. Now that brings us to second place, where again, if you're allowing holy bolts, it's Barbarian in second. If you aren't, well then Barbarian would be first. So Barbarian, but using a Thorns build for a very impressive tier 130 clear by Do Not Hit Me. This just makes sense to me because Barbarians are so naturally tanky and so survivable baseline compared to other classes. We look back at the Abattoir and you'd see them just standing there, tanking incredibly dangerous packs of enemies and not worrying about it, basically becoming truly immune to damage, while still landing their own big hits, fast attacks, and cleave, so they slowly work through groups of enemies that they pack up together as best they can, eventually killing that to the next pack and eventually the final bosses. Here it is much the same, with a focus on letting the enemies hit you because you want to reflect the damage back at them with Thorns. Because of that concept, I don't think this is going to be the best for boss killing or general gameplay at all. It's just specifically great for the pits. Enemies that are so dangerous but require so much DPS to kill that you don't have time to run around and avoid mechanics. So when they reach the boss, it's just silly. I will say that because they're able to ignore everything the boss is doing, just not worry about the mechanics, it is way less stressful to be in this situation for a long period. Everyone else has got to run around avoiding mechanics or instantly die. So that means the Barbarian can just worry about dealing DPS and that's it. Impressively though, at a tier 130, the kill happens with 128 left on the clock. So it does seem possible that this build will be able to clear a tier 131. But until then, technically, it's Necromancer with the highest clear right now. This clear is indeed a tier 131 by Fabian, using Golem Necromancer and yes, Holy Bolts to push the damage potential way higher than it truly would be without it. Again, that Necromancer that ranked with a very similar build but without Holy Bolts, that was down at a tier 121. 10 tiers below this, that's how impactful Holy Bolts really is. Take a look at the boss fight. Taking time, it's a process as you might expect, but occasionally there's this sudden burst of damage. When it's killed, there was still a lot of health left. 25% on a tier 131 boss is a lot, and then it just dies. That's because the Holy Bolt suddenly procced and then casually dealt billions of damage to end the fight. Compared to the Barbarian we just looked at with 1 minute and 28 seconds left, this player had 4 minutes and 18 seconds left, which is almost 3 full minutes more than the closest competitor. Absolutely insane. During the time that I was making this video, we had another clear by Vega, one of the top Necromancer players, who cleared a 132 on his stream. Once again, Minion Necromancer, mainly focused on Golem, and he had over 3 minutes left when he cleared this. Once again, Holy Unholy Bolts was a major part of the DPS, causing those massive bursts to actually get the health bar down. Without that, it would be a very different story, but it's a very clean 132 clear, so again I expect higher tiers to be cleared even before this video gets released. But should that really count? It's relying on a clear bug with an elixir. Maxroll thinks it shouldn't, and if you don't, then Necromancer would probably be placed third, with Barb first and Rogue second. To me, I would say it counts, it's in the game, but I also think they should remove this bug so there's no debate to have. But what do you think? But yeah, there you have it. That's my overview of the current power rankings when challenging the hardest content we have right now, which is the pits. I hope this was interesting or maybe useful to you, but until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.